second subcommittee hearing reviewing the department's fiscal year 23 budget request. But before I continue, I need to review the protocols for all members remotely joining the hearing. Members participating must be visible on screen for the purposes of identity verification, establishing and maintaining a quorum, participating in the proceedings, and voting. Members must continue to use the software platform's video function the entire time while in attendance, unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render them unable to participate on camera. If a member is experiencing technical difficulties, they should contact the committee staff for assistance. With that, I'd like to turn to my opening remarks. As I mentioned, we believe we have till 11, maybe a quarter of, but we're going to stretch that out as far as we can. We appreciate you working with us. So, first of all, today I'd like to welcome Mr. J. Stefany, Principal Civilian Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition, Lieutenant General Wise, Deputy Commandant for Aviation, and Lieutenant General Heckl, Commanding General, Marine Corps Combat Development Command, and Deputy Commandant for Combat Development and Integration. Thank you for being with us today and look forward to this discussion. It's important that we acknowledge the context of this year's Marine Corps Modernization budget request. 3 years ago, the Commandant of the Corps embarked on a significant orientation intended to better align the Corps with national security challenges posed by the realities of today and tomorrow. And certainly anybody who's reading any of the defense news, plenty to be said about that. But over these 3 years, Congress has found that the Marine Corps' modernization strategy generally relevant, stable, affordable, and achievable. And accordingly, we've demonstrated our support. However, modernization is not without challenges or risk. There are programs within and outside the jurisdiction of this subcommittee that certainly merit continued scrutiny. In today's hearing, we will specifically focus on rotary aviation and ground systems, which across the Marine Corps program appear generally in good shape. We're particularly interested to hear from our witnesses assessments and impacts on the department's equipment and munitions drawdown in support of the conflict in Ukraine. We also look forward to hearing their thoughts on modernization management, their use of new acquisition authorities intended to accelerate research development and the acquisition process. And finally, we look forward to hearing updates on specific programs such as the CH-53K, the ACV, the Amphibious Combat Vehicle, and Tactical Network, the long-range anti-ship fires, and air defense. Much to cover. And certainly we like to yield to my partner here on Tactical Air and Land from Missouri.
Missouri.
I'm a Jersey guy. It says Missouri here. We're going with that. But Vicki Hartzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to, first of all, thank our witnesses for being here today and for your dedicated service to our country. 3 years ago, Commandant Berger introduced Force Design 2030, a plan to radically and aggressively redesign and modernize the Marine Corps into a lighter, more lethal fighting force, better equipped, and more capable to deter and defeat current and future peer adversary threats. One of the most commendable aspects of the Marine Corps' plan was that the Marine Corps proposed paying for and resourcing the majority of this change from within. The Marine Corps has continued to deliver on their promise to transition from older platforms to newer, more capable systems in a stable, affordable, and achievable way. The majority of Marine Corps programs have remained on time, on track, and on budget, and this has not been lost on Congress. I look forward to a robust conversation with our witnesses about the current status of the Marine Corps' 2030 Force Design Development and Implementation and the critical defense programs necessary to yield the Marines with the capabilities and capacities for success. Thus far, Congress, and specifically this committee, has demonstrated our support for this program and the strategy that the Commandant has placed in front of us. I commend the Marine Corps leadership for their dedication and their hard work to continuously reassess modernization investment priorities and reallocate already limited resources to fund the development and procurement of essential defense requirements and capabilities necessary to build a more lethal defense force. As we discuss the future modernization of Marine Corps' ground and rotary programs, I would like the witnesses to identify what risks the Marine Corps is accepting in the short term in order to keep planned modernization programs affordable and on course to meet the mid to long-term defense requirements of creating a more lethal, resilient, and agile force able to compete, deter, and win against future threats from both peer competitors and rogue actors. I'm also interested in the Marine Corps' assessment of how a flat top line and the resulting imposition of cuts and decreases to lower priority programs and investment accounts affect the health and stability of your modernization strategy, as well as the industrial base that supports it. Lastly, the FY23 defense budget request did not factor in Russia's invasion of Ukraine or the ongoing response by the U.S. and our allies to provide vehicles, munitions, missiles, and other military equipment to Ukrainian forces in support of their fight against Russia. Today, I hope that our witnesses can inform us on how these missile and equipment transfers have affected U.S. stockpiles and whether you are getting what you need through the various supplemental appropriations to fund these operations, replace vehicle and equipment transfers, and replenish depleted munition stockpiles. If there are additional funding or authorizations we can provide in the FY23 NDAA and budget to get after replenishing some of these replenishments now and avoid the need to continue funding supplemental through 2023 to restore your depleted capabilities, we need to be having this critical discussion now. So I thank the chairman for organizing this important and timely hearing, and I yield back.
Thank you. And again, I just want to mention that what you have been doing with the limited funds and redirection of those items that are of the highest priority is not lost on this committee and what you're doing, and it is much appreciated. Not to suggest that there aren't things that are of concern, but I think generally we are heading in a very good direction. I think you'll hear that. I'm speaking for myself, but generally we certainly believe this. So, Ms. Stefany, great to have you back here, and your statement, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir, and thank you for that comment. Chairman Norcross, Ranking Member Hartzler, distinguished members of the subcommittee, on behalf of myself, Lieutenant General Heckl, and Lieutenant General Wise, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to speak to the Department of Navy's FY23 budget request for Marine Corps modernization. During this hearing, you will hear that the Marine Corps has undertaken an aggressive modernization of its warfighting programs over the last 3 years. Lieutenant General Heckl and Wise are going to explain why this modernization was required, while emphasizing that the fundamental mission of the Marine Corps, to be the most ready when the nation is least ready, has not changed. The Marine Corps will continue to serve as a force in readiness, prepared to answer the nation's call whenever and wherever that may be around the globe. As we watch the events unfold in Ukraine, it is clear that warfare is changing. Small, distributed formations with powerful and precision lethality, using advanced intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms, loitering munitions, and anti-armor fires have proven to be very effective in combat operations. It is evidence we cannot stand still. The Marine Corps Force Design Initiative recognizes this new reality, focusing on more capable intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms and smaller systems for our ground formations. Additionally, the Marine Corps is investing in the research and development of its future loitering munition, which we call organic precision fires. We are using middle-tier acquisition authorities for this program and other force design programs that will allow us to rapidly develop fieldable prototypes and demonstrate new capabilities, speeding the delivery of those capabilities to the Marines. The Marine Corps' top priority remains the Navy Marine Corps Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System, or NEMESIS, a ground-based anti-ship missile system. We have successfully conducted 2 tests of Nemesis, most recently in August 2021, and are currently conducting developmental and operational assessment events for that system. I believe Nemesis will have an immediate effect in the operational environment when it is deployed in 2023. The FY23 budget request continues the pattern of investing in successful programs that will make a difference in future conflicts. This includes the ground-air task-oriented radar, which is currently supporting NATO operations, the amphibious combat vehicle, which has just met its benchmarks for mobility, protection, and safety and will deploy with Marine platoons later this year, and the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, the modern ground vehicle that will replace legacy Humvees over the next several years. The Marine Corps' forward posture is reliant on ground aviation and surface mobility, such as the CH-53K and the H-1 play critical roles within force design, providing lethality, maneuverability, targeting, flexibility, and persistent sustainment. We have completed operational testing of the CH-53K heavy lift helicopter and last month declared initial operational capability, or IOC, of that aircraft. The FY23 budget includes a request for block buy authority for FY23 and 24 aircraft production with a projected savings of $150 million over purchasing the aircraft 1 year at a time. We have also reached IOC for the VH-92A presidential helicopter program in the last year and are starting the White House commissioning efforts. The success of the Navy Marine Corps team to be ready to answer the nation's call is rooted in being forward deployed. This readiness provides options and decision space for our senior leaders, such as yourself. The Navy Marine Corps forward presence also helps incidents from becoming crisis, or a crisis from becoming a conflict. We are confident that the programs in our Marine Corps portfolio are achievable, affordable, and will make our Marines more successful. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and for your strong support of Marine Corps modernization. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Wise. You're now recognized.
So that was one statement for all 3 of us. Sorry about that. So repeat the same, right? Yes, sir.
I'm all in. I'm all in. Well, thank you for your statements. We had read them, and certainly this gives us more time for questions, which is certainly on top of that. You started one of your statements talking about Ukraine and what we've been witnessing and the impact particularly of the Javelins and Stinger to a lesser extent, at least in this area. Given the performance, and that's a tough word to suggest, in the Russians' vehicles in Ukraine, the assessment of what you're witnessing, both the lack of protection in some ways of the armor of Russian and the ability for Ukraine to use the missiles, particularly the Javelin, to literally decimate much of that armor. Marine Corps' assessment of that, what impact it might have on our existing fleet of vehicles and future. So Lieutenant General Heckl and Wise, if you could comment on that.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question, and I want to just echo real quick, sir, Mr. Stefany's comment about the continued support from this committee and all the subcommittees. I mean, it's just been tremendous. So, from the commandant, thank you. So, sir, I think first of all, we exercise caution to draw conclusions too early with what we're seeing in Ukraine, clearly, but we're very, very cautiously and closely monitoring events, and certainly as it would apply to the Navy Marine Corps team. I think one of the things to consider about just as an overarching, to kind of frame the discussion, the Russian tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs they've employed simply it seems like they're not there, right? So we use combined arms. So there's an inherent amount of protection and safety in the way we employ our forces as a combined arms MAGTAF Marine Air Ground Task Force. Specifically to the weapon system, sir, obviously I believe our nation makes some of the best gear on the planet. I don't think it, I know it. And it proves itself time and time again, all the way from the Mujahideen throwing the Soviets out of Afghanistan. You know, they said there was no change in ideology, no change in tactics. There was Stinger. So that's a case from history, and I think we're bearing it out again. I think the armor issue, the character of warfare is changing quickly in front of us, and I think we're seeing where just wrapping yourself in a bunch of armor that requires a lot of fuel and a lot of sustainment isn't necessarily going to make you safe and make you effective on the battlefield.
Sir, I think also what I would add is the distributed nature of how the Ukrainians are operating and the benefits they've seen from operating in that manner is very insightful and instructive in the direction the Marine Corps is going to kind of validate in some ways some of the approaches that we've taken there from the aviation side, ISR-wise. As you talk, much like the Commandant does often, about sense and make sense and how that allows you to be more effective in the battle space. I think we're seeing some of that from those operations as well, which flows directly across to the armor and the javelin, being able to do that targeting activity up front. So many good lessons. I would also say equally there's a couple of, we just need to make sure we learn the right lessons. In other words, what counter effect are the Russians using or not out there, so that we make sure that we put resilient systems out there that can survive in any battle space. Sir.
Thank you. I want to stay just for a moment this line and what we're learning from Ukraine, and we are shipping a tremendous amount of systems and weapons in addition to the humanitarian aid over to Ukraine, and the Marines have been part of that drawdown. So what I want to ask is, from your perspective, that assessment of risk of what we are sending versus what we have available to us, both from an operational capabilities, but also in terms of what we are shipping, what do we need to have available to us? In other words, the resupply. In particular, because of the change in your operating concept, what was the last number? 5,500 javelins, and that's a rough number, have been provided. Didn't split up where they're coming from, but what the impact is on the Marine Corps.
Yes, sir. I think most of those weapons would be in General Heckle's area. So, General. Yes, sir.
So, sir, the Marine Corps has supplied first to Ms. Hartzler's comment about when this budget request, as you alluded to, was not constructed with the supply to the Ukrainians in mind. So that is an issue. You're exactly right. Second, and then third, we have provided approximately 1,000 Javelin missile systems and approximately 1,000 Stinger missile systems to Ukraine, and they are absolutely critical to be resupplied for us. And I would look to Mr. Stefany if there's any industrial-based concerns.
Yes, sir. So the other question you had in the opening was supplementals, and that first very small supplemental, I think $3.4 billion, not enough, right? Obviously not enough to resupply. So we look forward to both your committee and the larger Congress on the larger funding effort for the supplemental. But we do have a little bit of money, and we are starting to recharge that line right now, sir.
Thank you. Obviously, we are waiting eagerly for the latest to pass through the other house and get that moving, but certainly there's nothing unique to the Marines, Javelins, and Stingers that isn't facing the other services. I just want to shift over a little bit to the CH-53Ks, which are moving along, and talk about the brownout issue. Lieutenant General Wise, we've read a lot about it. We've heard a lot about it. There's been some mitigation and changes made along the lines. Can you tell us where you are now and going forward, the risk that we're looking at in the present configuration?
Sir, thank you for the question. On the 53K, okay, I think the light's just a little dim. Sorry about that. Sir, for the 53K, the initial assessment was very early in the test process. And so I would answer it in two ways because we address it from multiple different angles. The 53K, when we start the test events, we start at the very heart of the envelope and we work out. And so the initial test events are very limited. So things like, time limitations within a certain environment. And then we know that the envelope will go beyond that, but we test it in tranches out from there to validate the fact that we got the envelope right. So some of the limitations were based on those initial envelope limitations. What we've found since then is a couple of things on the equipment side. One is the diagnostic capability of this airframe is spectacular, meaning the pilot can actually get a real-time engine performance capability readout to make real-time decisions on how the engines are performing regardless of the environment, but it includes the brownout conditions. So that's part of it. It's actually been expanding the envelope much wider than those initial assessments indicated. The other side, too, is the automation on the airframe. Because the automation is designed to allow a pilot to get that airframe into even the worst brownout conditions and on the ground safely and minimize its time in that particulate matter, which also really negates the issues we have with potential issues you might have with the brownout conditions. So far since then, we have actually demonstrated in the worst brownout conditions that aircraft has performed for 21 minutes in the worst brownout conditions with zero degradation of the engines. So it kind of points back to the initial test parameters can be taken in the wrong way. We purposely limit it until we prove ourselves correct as we go out. But it's been performing brilliantly. But there are multiple systems on board that make that airplane the safest one out there.
Thank you. Let me shift over for Mr. Stefany. When we talk about acquisition, quite often, what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong? But on this one, you have asked for the block buy authority rather than a multi-year. Can you explain to us why the block buy versus a multi-year at this point?
Yes, sir. So a multi-year is still in our plan. Our plan is, after the block buy, 2-year block buy, to do a 5-year multi-year procurement after that. The reason we're not doing it now, right off the bat, is the criteria that is in statute to be able to have a proven design, proven manufacturing, enough data to give the CAPE so they can make an independent estimate. We did not have all that at the beginning of the process for this budget cycle. So we decided this budget cycle and next we will get that data out of Sikorsky, and then we'll be able to provide it to you and to the CAPE to do that analysis for a multi-year starting, a 5-year multi-year starting 2 years from now. So it was more, we just didn't have the data to be able to justify it at this point in time.
But the authority is obviously so you can accelerate and give to your subs and the supply chain that this is coming?
Yes. So the part that we really wanted, the supply chain, the block buy, takes care of a big part of that, right? We can go buy 2 years worth of equipment at once, get the supply chain spun up so that when we do the 5-year multi-year, they're up to full speed.
Incredibly important, particularly coming off the pandemic. With that, I turn to Ranking Member Mrs. Hartzler.
Thank you. Kind of build on the conversation we already had, back to the depleted stocks and the supplementals that have been through. If the Senate approves the bill that was passed in the House, is that going to be adequate, or are you going to need more in the FY23 NDAA?
So, ma'am, for what we know right now and what we project, that would be adequate. Now, again, what the war continues on and there are more requests for drawdown material, it could obviously, change over time. But right now, we believe that is sufficient for where we can project going forward.
Okay. Well, please keep us posted on that. And as it relates to the industrial base, this situation in the Ukraine and the ensuing global allied mobilization provides support by way of equipment and munitions, has shown a light on some serious issues existing with our industrial base and supply chain. So how are you working with partners in the military, industrial base, and supply chains to mitigate and fix these issues?
Yes, ma'am. So a very, very close partnership. Both Stinger and Javelin obviously are made with our partners in the Army and the Air Force, and we're working together with industry, recognizing something like Javelin is a little more modern. That production line is able to scale easier. Stingers, we're going to have to go back and probably, if not need more, probably not more authority, but we may need more industrial-based money to kind of get them up to a high enough production level they can restock us in time. So that's an effort we're working with the Army, and we will certainly come back to this committee once we get those results.
When do you anticipate that to be?
Ma'am, I don't have a date. I'll take that for the record to get you that.
Yeah, because we need this answer yesterday, really. Yeah. I mean, you know,
yes,
so we can produce the Stingers again or shift to another munition that maybe another country even has perfected that's the same capability. Is there any changes that need to be made in our current defense acquisition and sustainment strategies to get over these problems of long lead times, parts and workforce shortfalls, and material obsolescence?
I mean, I think between authorities we already have, as well as Defense Production Act type authorities, I think we have the authorities we need. We now need to finish the assessment of where the biggest risks are, and then start moving out on addressing those.
Okay. Yeah, as soon as possible, obviously, would be,
yes, ma'am.
Be bad. And then as far as the CH-53K, I'm really glad to hear about the problem the solution, it seems like, with the brownout concerns to 21 minutes without any degradation at all. That's encouraging. But the CH-53K from its start, though, has had per unit cost concerns. So I wanted to ask about that. And because it currently costs as much, if not more, per aircraft than the per unit cost of a Joint Strike Fighter. So can you explain why this is?
Ma'am, thank you for the question. For the 53K, we continue to realize cost reductions in the acquisition lots. The last two were the lowest two so far, and each of them came down a level each. And those, the cost for the most recent 53Ks, if you look at it at the same measurements that we use for the F-35, it's actually lower.
How much is it now?
The last lot was negotiated at $93.7 million per copy. If you use the same metric for the 35, depending on which variant, it's approximately 117 to 107, so depending on the variant.
So how are you working with them to bring down costs?
Yes, ma'am. So we actually work it in multiple angles. Part of it's with the program office to drive cost out of the actual process, as well as with the vendor at Sikorsky and Lockheed Martin. But there are other things that are helping us. One is Congress' generosity for the addition of 2 additional airframes in the last 2 lots per lot. So that was 4 additional airframes, helps drive down the cost through quantity buy. Recently, on the international side, the Israelis committed to purchase 12 aircraft with an option for 6 more. It looks very good that they will go down that road. There are additional opportunities starting to show up for the 53K. I know it'll be part of the Berlin Air Show this year. So looking at more opportunities to drive down costs through quantity buy as well. So approaching it from multiple angles, not just manufacturing, but allowing their learning curve to come up and produce in a more effective manner.
Okay. We're going to switch to another platform, the Nemesis. You mentioned that in your opening statement, and it does sound like a very exciting, very helpful platform. Can you provide us more information, though, on what this system is and the advanced capabilities it brings to the fight?
All right, I'm on now. Here we go. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Glad to, and thanks for the question. Nemesis is another one of the programs kind of alluded to by yourself and the chairman as far as things going right for us. The Navy Marine Corps Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System is our #1 modernization priority for the Commandant. The system consists of 2 naval strike missiles, which we work in partnership with our Navy brothers and sisters, and it's fired from the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle chassis, and we've had a lot of success. And as Mr. Stefany alluded to, it's been employed multiple times, and as recently as the end of April doing envelope expansion. We had very successful shots over the course of 3 days. So the weapon system continues to perform, and quite frankly, from August of 21 during large-scale exercise, we actually fired two Navy strike missiles against a maritime target. Both had very successful launch, flight, and impacts. So we're very, very pleased with that. And at this level, of classification level, the range is we're very pleased with the range as well. So going forward, we're looking forward to fielding the system and getting it out to the fleet as soon as we possibly can.
When do you anticipate that fielding? I mean, it just sounds like a great capability.
End of FY23, ma'am, is when it'll start.
How many?
I think we're getting out. I'd have to take. I don't know the exact number, ma'am. Take that for the record. I'll get back to you on the specific number.
Okay, great. I have a couple more, maybe if we have a second round, but I'll yield back.
Ms. Sherrill, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to just compliment the Army and Marine Corps on resourcing initiatives to improve the form, fit, and function for female soldiers and Marines in their PPE gear. That's long been a concern of mine, and I encourage you to continue in those efforts. Mr. Stefany, we've just heard from General Heckl, the battlefield is changing rapidly. In a recent hearing with the commandant, General Berger stated that he wanted to give the enemy multiple problems on the battlefield to solve. The new force design for the Marine Corps is to acquire and field indirect fire systems with increased range, accuracy, long-range precision fires that can service both maritime and ground targets. What, if any, cannon artillery platforms is the Marine Corps looking at to meet this need?
I'd have to defer that one to General Heckl on that platform.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. So thanks for the question. And specifically, you asked about what about cannon artillery? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So as you know, ma'am, the commandant has said from the start of force design that as we experiment and within our campaign of learning, which it forms the analytical rigor that underpins every decision we make in force design, we will make changes. The commandant made a change. We were initially going to draw down to 5 batteries of 777 155 millimeter artillery. We are now going to go to 7, but we're also increasing those batteries from 6 tubes to 8. We'll have 4 on the west, 3 on the east. Did that answer the question?
That answers the question of what you're looking at now, because surely the bulkier missile batteries with long occupation times and a large geographic signature will put the MRL at risk. And so I'm wondering if the Marines have explored adding some of the long-range precision fires currently under research and development as a way to allow the Marine commanders long-range fires without sacrificing survivability and maneuverability.
You betcha, ma'am, and you're absolutely right. The towed cannon artillery on the battlefield is very susceptible. Absolutely. We are, as you may or may not know, we have HIMARS currently within our inventory, and we are working very closely with the Army. Obviously, the Marine Corps is not really big enough to pursue programs on our own, so we always seek out sister services to work with. It makes it more affordable, and so we're doing that with the Army. We're going down the route, as you know, or may not know, HIMARS eventually will turn into the MLRS, multiple launch rocket system family of munitions, which will include Gimlers, ATACMs, and eventually to Prism missile, which is going to be a phenomenal capability, which will do both land and surface targets. Did that get at it, ma'am?
Yeah, thank you. And stepping away a bit from the need to service targets, I'd like to talk about how the MRL will sustain itself. With missile platforms being bulky and presenting significant challenges for commanders hoping to maintain a basic load of ammunition for their formations in a contested environment, does the Marine Corps have a solution for conducting ship-to-shore resupply of the bulky missile platforms? And when it comes to combat logistics, I know every bit of space on a truck, ship, aircraft matters, especially when delivering all classes of supply to littoral regiments. Do you feel that the Marines will face a challenge in resupplying the bulk missile systems throughout the theater? Ma'am,
great. You're just firing one great question after another. Obviously, right now, ma'am, within force design, I will tell you that Logistics in a contested environment is our pacing effort right now. It is absolutely our pacing effort. We are laser focused on it and getting after it down at my command within, particularly within the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab and Capabilities Development Directorate. So we're all over it. It is always, logistics, anybody that tells you otherwise, logistics is always a challenge. And it can never be emphasized enough in preparation. I will simply tell you the strength of the Marine Corps, the MAGTAF, which a Marine Littoral Regiment is simply a form of a MAGTAF. It is tailored for a specific theater and a specific threat. But we have the organic lift we have within the MAGTAF, both air and surface, is one of our greatest strengths. So, for instance, the Nemesis is fully internally transportable in a 53K. We've demonstrated it. I mean, within a KC-130J, we've demonstrated it multiple times. And as you also know, we are standing up a 4th active duty VMGR KC-130J squadron with 16 aircraft going to Hawaii specifically to provide additional organic lift within the Indo-Pacific. So, and that brings me to the LAW, the Light Amphibious Warship. The surface connectors, man, will be absolutely critical. And just to keep it short here, the important aspect of a LAW, or landing ship medium really is its appropriate name, is the fact that it is a shore-to-shore connector. So again, what you're seeing play out in Ukraine, big signatures of any type, whether it's a logistics or anywhere in the electromagnetic spectrum, trails of fuel trucks to refuel armor, those are signatures, and they are targetable, and they become vulnerabilities. So the shore-to-shore connector capability of the LAW is critical. We don't require ports. We don't require big 12,000-foot runways. We do things from an austere perspective. Did that answer it, ma'am?
Well, thank you. Yes, thank you very much, General. And my time has expired, but I will say maybe for my oversight responsibilities, I should come test some of those 53Ks for you guys. So maybe one of these days. Thanks. And I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Whitman, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stefany, Lieutenant General Heckl, Lieutenant General Wise, thanks so much for joining us. General Heckl, let me ask about the Commandant's guidance. He talks about lightening the force, especially when it comes to combat and transportation. He also talks about it being theater agnostic to make sure we can operate in the Indo-PACOM, but also have the ability to cross over into the European theater. Wherever we're needed is to make sure that lightening the force is able to do that. The update 2022, I think, really refines the testing that you all have done to really get that concept down to where it needs to be. Can you give us a little more insight about that whole concept of lightening the force, where you are with the testing of this, with Marines in the field, figuring this out, and where you are today? I know you've made a number of adjustments with the size of battalions, the number of MV-22s, the number of artillery pieces. Can you tell us a little bit about how you have that in the Commandant's planning guidance and how that really allows you to achieve the national defense strategy?
So, sir, again, great question. I know you and I have talked before, sir. So, lightening any force, it simply makes it more agile and flexible, yeah. And therefore creates a certain dynamic component of that force. And I think we're seeing that play out in Ukraine right now, real time, right? So we're seeing widely dispersed, well-equipped, lethal, precision munitions, and then the ability to move. So let me give you, for an example, to kind of back into the question previous. We have demonstrated multiple times how we can load Nemesis on the KC-130, land, and remember, a KC-130 doesn't necessarily require an airfield, right? It can land in austere environments. It has to be prepped, but it can still land. We do it pretty regularly. The weapon system offloads, fire caps, launches the missile, reloads, and gets back in the aircraft and is gone before the missile actually impacts the target. That's the kind of dynamic I'm talking about. So lightening any force is going to make that easier to do. And I will also say that with the ubiquity of sensors right now, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, if you can be seen and you're a worthy target, meaning the cost of position and am I going to expend an expensive weapon system, you can be hit. Mm-hmm. And that is where we're getting after signature management in all ways. And it's kind of back to the future a little bit, right? We're doing camo netting. We now have companies that we are on contract with that have netting that can go over vehicles as well as people that reduce and eliminate IR signature, mm-hmm. eliminate visual. It's pretty impressive. So that technology is advanced as well. So the lighter, the better from every perspective. The lighter means less sustainment. You're a less needy force, which means I'm reducing the signature. Did that get after it, sir?
Yeah.
That's a big question. I could go on all day, and I don't want to eat up all your time.
No, that's spot on. Let me ask to look at today's situation, and that is, as you are looking at lightening the force, one of the challenges that gets thrown at you is what's happening now with munitions that are going out the door, both Javelin and Stinger, as we've heard. And listen, we understand what needs to be done with the industrial base to resupply, those sorts of things. But I think the more important and immediate question is what does the Marine Corps do in the meantime as a mitigation? So as these weapon stores are going down, what happens if something occurs between now and the time that we resupply? And what can Congress do to help you in that mitigation strategy?
Well, sir, I think, and Mr. Stefany may have something to say here. I'm not super familiar with how the industrial base is postured and what capability, like in World War II, rolling 16 B-17s off the line a day, Boeing did. But I will simply say there are ways to mitigate risk. A big part of that, sir, is the continued deterrence that is referenced in the National Defense Strategy. If you look at the whole spectrum of things, the desire is to never get to the right side, right? We want to avoid actual kinetic operations. Right. The threshold of violence may be breached every now and then as we compete and we deter, but the point is to deter, right. To avoid getting to a situation where the levels of our stores are a concern, right? Mm-hmm. So for a Marine, that means being forward, being present with our allies and partners. And I think, quite frankly, sir, there's a lot of strength in our allies and partners who utilize similar weapon systems. And I think we need to play to that advantages too. Sir, I don't know if you have any comments about industrial base.
Stefany?
No, I would just add that the Marine Corps has not reached a place where they cannot support the forward deployed Marines, right? We haven't got there, and we will certainly talk, the Commandant, I'm sure, will come and talk to you before we get to that place. So it's not like we've given away all of our missiles, right? We still have plenty of them for the forward deployed Marines.
And sir, as you know, we track very carefully and closely the training status of our units, because those same weapon systems have to be used. Our Marines have to fire them on a periodic basis to maintain their readiness and proficiency.
That's great. Thanks. Listen, I think it's incredibly important for us to know well ahead of time, because as you know, the ability to resupply right now has atrophied, and that's a risk in and of itself. So, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Mr. Bacon, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Appreciate you gentlemen being here and for your leadership. I wanted to ask you about long-range strike capabilities. I know the Marines are investing in it, so are the Army. A little more challenging in the Pacific Theater, though, because you have basing concerns. Yep. And so my question would be, how do you envision this working in the Pacific Theater? And I say that because I know the Air Force has got the B-21. They're going to have standoff weapons. The Navy will have shipborne capabilities. So is this a real viable forward for the Marine Army and the basing issues? How do we deal with it? Thank you.
Hey, sir, great question. And as you know, we've Nemesis is one of our systems. The other one is long-range precision fires, which is the Tomahawk. Again, we share that with the Navy, right? So an incredibly long-range weapon. We have demonstrated that weapon system firing off of one of our platforms, ground-based, and we're very happy with it. We have yet to determine going forward. It is a larger missile system than Navy Strike Missile and the Nemesis. So we, again, from my concern as a requirements guy for the Marine Corps, I get concerned when I see things that are big and heavy, read signature, difficult to resupply, signature. The ground-based Tomahawk, and by the way, it's launched out of a Mark 41 vertical launch system, which is looks similar to other ones. So there's opportunities there as we go forward. Leave it at that. So yes, sir, we have that capability. It is very viable. Now you're concerned about access, right, with allies and partners. Absolutely, sir. I mean, one of the things, the difference is how the Marine Littoral Regiment and the multi-domain task force that the Army's fielding. The multi-domain task force the Army is fielding and the MLR are complementary in nature. MLR is smaller, a little more nimble, organic lift, expeditionary. The MDTF is a little bit bigger, but has bigger punch and farther punch. It will be up to allies and partners to determine what they're going to allow in, right? But I think from my perspective as a Marine, and we have units from 1 MEF and 3 MEF, the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force lives inside the WES day in and day out. But and we work with allies and partners. So it'll really depend on what they allow in. But to your point, a big missile system might not be something they may be a little bit concerned about.
I worry about the access, though. I would think those blend of capabilities between the Air Force, Navy, Army, and Marines is best. But if you don't have the basing abilities,
That's right.
That's the concern I have. Maybe in Europe and Middle East, there's other more opportunities. I want to ask you: is there a primary weapon that we need to have replenished for the Marines? What's your number one or number two things that the Marines need replenished?
Sir, I would tell you right now, the Commandant's number one issue is not pertaining to this, but is amphibious ships to be forward deployed. Weapon system-wise, our number one priority is the Nemesis, sir.
Yeah. For dealing with Ukraine, was there certain weapons that the Marines had to send over that we need to be focused on for replenishment?
The Javelin and Stinger.
The Javelin's primarily, okay. I know we touched on it a little bit, so that would be your priority.
Yes, sir.
Okay. One of the things I felt like that we could have done quicker in this Ukraine fight is provided the capabilities of tanks 20, 30, 40 miles behind the lines. We're starting to see that. We see other countries that have some really good capabilities that Ukraine's using right now. What would be your advice here on how we could be, I guess, easier to sell our capabilities? Our remote piloted aircraft, for example. I feel like we're hindered by our rule set. Other countries are filling that capability. Do you see the same issue? Hopefully that follows.
So, sir, I think, and I don't know if Natso wants to chime in here, as you mentioned UAVs. I did a couple years with NATO as a brand new one-star at Strike Force NATO in Lisbon. Spent a good bit of time on the Mount Whitney and doing exercises. I think, from our perspective, I think whatever we do, I think working within the NATO construct and our NATO partners, that I think we can contribute more. I don't disagree with you. You always hindsight. You always wish you could have moved faster, right? So I don't know if Natso, you have anything you want to chime in?
I'll jump in. We do have restrictions on UAVs, UASs, as you know, sir, that slows us down. On the surface, though, we could have a conversation of unmanned surface type things we're doing in a different forum that are not as slow as those are going on.
Just as in the RPA area, the other countries are moving within our circle much faster, and I feel like we're losing an opportunity to provide our great weapons in that case. But I'm running out of time, so I'll yield back. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Hartzler, for holding this hearing today. Thank you to our distinguished guests for being here. I know this is a TAL hearing. We're here to discuss modernization strategies and programs such as rotary aviation and ground systems. However, I briefly want to touch on the importance of modernization for the medical community as an aside here. As we constantly look for cost savings and ways to modernize our systems, there seems to be a trend of looking towards making cuts on the medical side to support the needs of the line side. Most recently, we saw the medical officer of the Marine Corps position get cut, which is a decision that I wholeheartedly disagree with. A mistake like cutting the TMO sets us further back in our modernization efforts and could potentially cause irreparable damage to our medical readiness. I understand that having the latest aircraft and weapon systems is extremely important, but that doesn't matter if we forget to care about our people. If we are forced to compete and win in the Indo-Pacific, having appropriate leadership and accountability in the medical community is going to be paramount for our success. So as we modernize our military, I would strongly encourage the Department of the Navy leadership to reconsider the decision and reinstate the TMO. That said, I want to shift gears now and talk about some of the modernization efforts included in this year's budget request. On Wednesday, the full committee heard testimony from General Berger that I was impressed with on the modernization efforts being undertaken by the Marine Corps to adapt to the needs of the Indo-Pacific theater. One thing that General Berger mentioned was the need for Congress to provide funding for the V-22 nacelle improvement. General Wise, I appreciated you telling this committee a few weeks ago that you share the same feelings that we have in the need to ensure that we modernize our V-22 fleet and increase the platform's overall readiness. In the unfunded priorities list submitted to Congress, nearly $75 million was requested for nacelle improvement. These documents also show a commitment from the Marines to continue this vital program in future years. Modernizing our V-22 is not something that we can wait on. It's something we need to get started on now. As you know, the workforce in Amarillo, where I represent, has risen to the occasion of completing the Air Force's nacelle improvement process ahead of schedule. There's no doubt in my mind that this would be the case for the MV-22 nacelle improvement program as well. In the written submission to the committee, when asked, do you know of any factors that have the potential to hinder execution of additional funds for this item in FY23, the answer was very clearly stated as no. All of this leads me to wonder if the amount requested on the unfunded priorities list is enough. That's a question. Or if Congress needs to consider even larger amount to ensure that we can dominate any future conflict. My question, if additional work can be accommodated by the workforce conducting nacelle improvement, we should increase the rate at which this work is done. General Wise, would the Marines be able to accelerate the nacelle improvement program further if additional funds were appropriated over the amount requested in the unfunded priorities list?
Sir, great question. And as we mentioned before, we are very laser focused on making sure there's no break in that line and that we continue that nacelle improvement. We've already laid in money, as you know, through fiscal year 23 for the long lead to ensure that it starts right at the backside of the Air Force upgrades to keep that going. As far as accelerating, I believe the line does have the capacity to accelerate. We would also have to balance that with, aircraft off the line to make sure we had an optimum sequencing, so as the rest of the readiness of the fleet to deploy is balanced. So that part I would have to take for the record as far as how could we accelerate it further in order to make sure we still have adequate capacity for deployments and still maximize the line. But certainly are very interested in the program because it does offer so many readiness perks for us, of course.
Yes, sir, I agree with that. And I've had the opportunity to go out to Bell and to look at these things when they tear them apart, when they're doing and some of them, look fairly good, and some of them, look like they really need a lot of work. And so I'd like to see us do that as soon as possible. On a bipartisan basis, many members of the committee have agreed that the President's budget request does not give us the resources that we need. I do anticipate that we will need to provide additional funding to account for the inadequate budget that we received. General Wise, one more question. I would like to ask you another question related to the V-22. As we looked at the need to compete and win in the Indo-Pacific in potentially just a few years, what are the capability gaps that we would face if we didn't have an adequate level of readiness for our V-22 fleet? And are there any other platforms that would be able to accomplish this mission instead?
So the V-22 is extraordinarily capable, as you know, just because of the speed, the battlefield tempo it develops. There's still nothing else that can do it that way. Can we lift, folks? I mean, assault support with 53, with other platforms. Can you do those missions? You can, not at the speed. And speed is very, very important. So it does fill a unique capability. And that's something that we need to make sure that we maximize readiness to have those assets forward when we need them.
Thank you, sir. I think my time is up here, but I just wanted to also say I'm going to have a third question I'll submit for the record. It's related to the Army's future vertical lift and where the Marines are looking, if they're looking at what the Army's doing, because I hope that we go down that path at the Marine Corps as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Just a note, they have called votes, but there are at least one question that Vicki and I have. Do you have another? Okay, so, and I'll let Vicki jump in here. Let's talk about the Humvees. Obviously, we are moving towards the JLTV, but it is no surprise to anybody in this room. Many of the accidents have taken the lives of our young servicemen and women, and the mitigation that has been going on. You're well aware of that. Yet there is nothing in this year's request in terms of mitigating that. Can you explain to us why you have elected not to include any of the safety upgrades, General Heckl?
Absolutely, sir. So the Marine Corps is all in on JLTV, and we are not retaining the Humvee. So we are going to get out of the Humvee business, period. So the faster we can do that, the better. The JLTV has proven itself to be a really solid weapon system. It is more safe, more capable, more survivable from every perspective. It has a lot of safety features that are inherent. And by the way, sir, some of the older lot Humvees that we have, you can't even upgrade. And we have very carefully identified the best of breed and the worst of breed. We're getting rid of the worst as quickly as we can, the older vehicles that are in worse shape. But the JLTV has, as you know, the anti-lock braking system. It has electronic steering control, all the things that contribute to a lower mishap rate all the way around, things such as rollovers. So again, I think we fielded approximately 2,500 of them, and our AAO is 12,500, and we're just moving out as quick as we can. So that's our whole. So as you know, I think there's 413 in this request, and there are some on the unfunded priorities list. So the faster we can go with JLTV, the faster we can replace Humvee.
We agree with you with the JLTV. It's a great vehicle, but at today's estimate, we're talking about 2031 before we get rid of those. Mitigation, getting rid of those who can't be retrofitted, obviously. That's a long time. And this is a serious issue that we know how to fix at a relatively low cost, and it is something that we believe is extremely important, and nobody likes to throw good money after a bad system, but 2031 is a long time off, and I'll just defer to Ms. Hartzler for any additional comments.
Just a quick follow-up. It was my impression that in this budget, the JLTV is on the unfunded priority list, that there is none. So you just said there's 413 requested?
I'm pretty sure we have 413 vehicles in this budget request. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Wise, I just wanted to talk a little bit. We talked a lot about the platforms, but the most important part of that platform is the pilot. And I wanted to get your thoughts on rotary wing pilot retention and recruitment into the future. It looks like to me at the company level between 3rd and 8th year, those pilots become more and more of a challenge to be able to keep. Give us your perspective on what the Marine Corps is doing and needs to do to make sure we retain those pilots, which we're going to need in the years to come.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. So obviously we track very closely all of our pilot retention issues. There are some areas that are very complex and challenging right now, as we know, and we attack those from multiple different directions. So some of it is making sure the accession piece is adequate, but the big thing, which I think really gets more towards the question, is the retention side of the house. So some of that is looking at bonuses. We've got a range of bonuses depending on the platform in order to provide some enticement. I would tell you from a very personal perspective, when I was, being looked at for retention in the early years, that though enticing and nice, it was not the sole thing that kept me, because what really comes into play, and I think most would agree with me, is that right command climate, selecting the right people to provide that atmosphere that people want to come to work every day. They want to be part of something like that. So we're very focused there as well. The other good piece of it is being very tied in closely with my counterparts in the Naval Aviation Enterprise, specifically Sinatra, so Chief of Naval Aviation Training, and watching those pipelines to make sure as they go through that we're meeting our requirements for those pilots. For instance, we're a few short this year, but of course the year is only about half over, so it will fluctuate a little bit towards the end, but we watch them so closely because we don't want to get behind. In most communities, we're actually considered healthy, which is 85% or above, in the rotary wing community. I would not say that's true across the board. There are plenty of challenges to go around, but that one we stay very glued to. We're relatively healthy right now in that regard.
Mr. Vesey, you're now recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. General Wise, I wanted to ask you a question. Now that each service is orienting its modernization strategy and priorities on some variation of multi-domain operations, how does the V-22 fit into this and any future tilt rotor platforms?
Sir, thank you for the question on the looking at really distributed operations, widely distributed operations, particularly as we look at the Pacific. The V-22 is for us very uniquely capable, not just because of the fact that it can deliver sustainment to anywhere or people, but it's the speed at which it can do that. It's demonstrated over and over since it started combat deployments in 2007 that it is uniquely capable to do things that no other platform can do. So the tilt rotor side, I think, is demonstrated across all the services, as we've seen it take in the Navy and Air Force Special Operations. Everyone is seeing the value of that platform. The Japanese have come on board as well. So As far as future of tilt rotor and other opportunities, and there was a question earlier having to do with future vertical lift and how the Marine Corps is really expanding its view of some of the capabilities that have been developed through that program that would suggest that some of the tilt rotor and potentially unmanned capabilities to further expand our ability and capacity to sustain forces in widely distributed environments. There's huge potential in that area moving forward. So we're working very closely with all the vendors, the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy through what we're now calling a family of systems within the future vertical lift to address those specific additional capacity requirements.
What about the tilt rotor industrial base and the rotary wing aviation industrial base? What's like just your kind of overall assessment of that right now?
For the industrial base, I'd probably let Mr. Stefany talk to that one.
Yeah, please.
Happy to follow up with anything you'd like.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's well known we're kind of in a, certain lines coming to an end, and Army's first, but the future vertical lift is the future, and we have this kind of gap in the middle, right? That's why the nacelle program was potentially a very good way of filling that void to keep the workforce hot as first the Army, then the Navy and Marine Corps make our selections for future vertical lift. We are looking at both major aircraft suppliers and engine suppliers, the whole group, to try to make sure we're doing it smartly with our Air Force and Army counterparts.
What do you think are the biggest challenges, as you look at that base, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that we're going to have to be able to overcome to keep moving forward?
Yes, sir. I think as we go, just the skilled workers, right? Being able to get the right skilled mechanics in the right area. It's maybe not as appealing a career field as maybe it was 10 or 20 years ago. And so getting the right skills of the right workforce, not losing them in places like Amarillo, but also other parts of the country, making sure we as a nation are keeping those blue-collar skills active and a choice career for our younger folks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot of that in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Thank you very much. I appreciate your answers, and we'll turn it back over to the chairman.
Thank you. And to our witnesses, very much appreciated. Votes have been called, so this is perfect timing, and very much appreciate testimony and certainly answering those questions. We are adjourned.